Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to the Alliance blog here on YouTube. And every Tuesday at 5:05 Eastern, 2:05 Pacific, we do a live stream called the Preparty with me, J-Cal. However, this Tuesday is a little bit different. This is not a live stream. This is an uploaded video. The difference being is I won't be in the chat room interacting with you guys, and I won't be taking your questions. But if you leave them in the comments below, we'll be sure to get to them. But for now, welcome to the party, pal.
Podcasting out of Alliance Wrestling Studios, pontificating on pro wrestling, the innovator of Talk NWA, he is J-Cal!
So moving on into the world of professional wrestling, guys, I mean, things are changing rapidly. We still have the WWE promoting their live events from the Performance Center. AEW still holding events. Cody Rhodes is your TNT champion. What is a TNT champion? We've got Impact promoting live events. I don't know if they're promoting live events. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but they certainly are adding more people to their roster. Things are starting to move forward. Even my very own Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, and I say that not that I have ownership, but it's kind of where I do most of my work at. Championship Wrestling from Hollywood is seemingly coming back to production. I recently sat down with David Marquez, had an amazing interview with him. We talked about all things professional wrestling, not just limited to the National Wrestling Alliance. If you care about Southern California indie wrestling, it's definitely worth a watch. If you care about the NWA, of course it's worth a watch. If you want to know who tried to buy the NWA, certainly worth a watch. Some of the problems they had with TNA, again, I think this would be a very interesting watch for anybody. I'm going to try to put a card right here so that you guys can check it out, but definitely make sure you watch that video. They're planning to return to the Ocean View Pavilion, which is just north of Hollywood by an hour or so. But that's a good sign, guys. It means wrestling is starting to come back. And I know that we're going to have some hiccups, guys. We're still dealing with a pandemic. So with everything else that's going on in the world, we're still dealing with a pandemic. And of course, there's murder hornets on the way and everything else. But wrestling still moves forward. And if you're a part of Carnyland, I think that's great and enjoy it. I've been watching along with you guys. I've been digesting the product that the NWA is putting out. But I want a return of wrestling. And I know that it's only going to happen when it's safe. But with Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, they are able to control that environment. They are able to do shows without fans. And I know if Marquez is starting to get back to the world of promoting live events, I think maybe the NWA might not be far behind. And, well, hey, maybe the NWA might do an event in Hollywood, or I don't want to say Hollywood, in Port Hueneme, California. Maybe we could have a Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, or at the very least an NWA Power taping in Hollywood. Maybe even just a few matches. I know I'm jonesing for it, guys, but we have this beautiful 10 pounds of gold, and Nick Aldis rapidly approaching 600 days as World Heavyweight Champion, but haven't had a title defense in months. And I know it's not Nick Aldis' fault. I know it's not the NWA's fault. But guys, I want wrestling. You know? Who's with me? Of course, I want the safety of the performers. That's paramount. Absolutely. But I want to see that 10 pounds of gold defended. You know, the momentum that the NWA had was so high. So high. And the win was taken from their sales. There hasn't been a live NWA wrestling event since January. January was approximately 5 years ago. And I'm being facetious, guys, but doesn't it feel like it? With so much has gone on, it feels like we're really living in another world. Where 5 years ago was January. I know it's not, guys. Don't send me messages. But I do want to say, I do want to encourage you guys to check out the content that's coming out from Carnyland. If you watch the sit down that Nick Aldis had with Crimson and I always want to call him Bram. Just say Bram because right now I'm having a brain fart. Um, Thomas Latimer, geez, thank you, Thomas Latimer. If you sit down and listen to that, it's great, guys. It is great, and they give you stories about some of the dealings that they had to do, dealing with coming up as independent performers, independent wrestlers. Crimson kind of pulls back the curtain a little bit on some of the NWA territories that predate Billy Corgan's involvement with the National Wrestling Alliance, and specifically talking about Mike Porter, Bill Prentice, and just some fun stuff. I highly recommend it. Of course, I watched Eli Drake's first episode, his first podcast, and I thought that was terrific as well. Again, I highly recommend it. The NWA is certainly one of the premier wrestling brands. I really feel that Billy Corgan, David Lagana, our world's heavyweight champion Nick Aldis, the champion before Tim Storm, have really worked hard to elevate this brand. I really feel like what they have with NWA Power is something that should continue to grow. And I hope that these offerings from the NWA don't stop because Power returns when it returns. I really hope we continue to get these segments, these videos. In fact, I think there's room for these still going forward on the show. I mean, imagine, if you will, because the NWA isn't back to full capacity running shows, imagine, if you will, a World's Heavyweight title match happening, taped in Hollywood for use on NWA Power, mixed in with some of Carnyland. It's just an idea. I saw someone suggest today, and I thought it was kind of clever, that why not film an episode of Championship Wrestling from Hollywood in Georgia and film an episode of NWA Power in Hollywood. And I mean, that would make great for an April Fool's Day joke, right? Honestly, I think the shows should be working in harmony anyways. I really think that, that's the thing. There's so much great content from the past, from Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, that ties directly to the NWA and what they're doing now. If you guys are just tuning into NWA in the last 2 years because of NWA Power or because of the 10 pounds of gold, there's a wealth of video that you guys missed out on, a wealth of really excellent storytelling. I mean, the very first episode of Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, taped in Santa Ana, California, not Hollywood, was Colt Boom Boom Cabana defeating Pretty Peter Avalon, the biggest man in pro wrestling, in the very first match, in the very first segment of the then NWA Hollywood programming. And when Cabana won the title, he declared his intentions, that guy right there, declared his intentions to challenge Scrap Iron Adam Pearce for that 10 pounds of gold. Guys, that story took us from, well, I mean, let's be honest, it started in Hollywood, or started in Santa Ana. Took us to Hollywood, where Colt Cabana won the title. And then it kind of fell off the rails, but as the story continued to progress, Adam Pearce eventually wins that title back in a triple threat match with Blue Demon and some other guy that you probably haven't heard of. And Adam Pearce takes that title, right? And who does he end up feuding with in Glendale, California? None other than this guy, Colt Cabana. Sorry for you not able to watch if you're listening. And Colt Cabana and Adam Pearce have this feud called the 7 Levels of Hate. And that match, that title, that feud literally traveled from coast to coast. Matches were happening in California, Oregon, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Kansas. Well, Metro Pro Wrestling. I'm not sure if that was Kansas or Missouri, but you get the point. The title was traveling. The title ended up going to Australia before ownership changed hands from the NWA. Things got real muddy and murky, and you had Adam Pearce and Colt Cabana finishing that feud and leaving the 10 pounds of gold in that Australian ring before it went back to the new NWA ownership. Stories like that, man, that's what gets people connected to wrestling. Nick Aldis, Marty Scurll, they have the makings of a great feud. Crockett Cup in 2019, all the way to Crockett Cup 2020, if that happens. But what's next after that? What stories will we see next? That's what I'm excited about. You've got guys on the roster like Eli Drake. Eli Drake. I mean, he could be your next World's Heavyweight Champion. Let's be honest. What about guys like James Storm? He's had 2 chances. Maybe the third time will be his lucky charm? I don't know. You look at that roster and you see those guys who could potentially be champion. What about Trevor Murdoch? Wouldn't he have a compelling story? The student of Harley Race, the guy who's been with the NWA for years, not just since NWA Power, guys. He goes back to NWA Hollywood with Dave Marquez. He goes back to World Legion Wrestling with David Marquez. Again, you should watch that video. You should watch that interview. How great would it be for a guy who's been with this brand for so long to finally get his opportunity to hold the same title that his mentor hold? I mean, god damn. There's some good stories to be told. One of the things I did really enjoy about NWA Power that they ended on a high note, is we finally got that Jack Dane Tim Storm match. And I hope when NWA Power returns, we see more of that. Because I don't think I've seen Tim Storm look as good in a match since his match with Nick Aldis. And I really think there's a compelling story right there. Jax Dane never got a rematch. Do you know how many opportunities Tim Storm had to take that title from Jax? It was more than once. It's more than twice. That feud was one of the hottest things that the Bruce Tharpe era ever did. I mean, Bruce Tharpe did 3 things right. Okay, he consolidated the NWA. No more members, no more votes, one person, one guy. That was smart because now you could control the brand a lot more easier than the NWA and its previous entities. The downside to that is you could control the NWA more so than its previous entities. There was no vote. There was no who's going to make these decisions. And I think that's why you ended up with some of the chaos that came early on. But ultimately, it solidified the NWA as one entity. It also gave way to Rob the Iron Man Conway to take the 10 pounds of gold to New Japan Pro Wrestling. If you guys don't know the story about Rob Conway, it's kind of funny. Let's turn back the hands of time a little bit. On the NWA showcase, he literally said to Dave Marquez that he was one day going to be a world's heavyweight champion. And sure as shit, guys, he won that title. And not only did he win that title, but he successfully defended that title at Wrestle Kingdom. He was in Japan. He was the last Kaijin to hold the 10 pounds of gold in Japan. Of course, he lost the title to Satoshi Kojima, but he won it back. And then again, he lost it to Hiroshi Tenzan, but that was the last time the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship was in Japan. Well, in New Japan. And we talk about the success of pro wrestling and how Japan is kind of like this wonderland where you need to go to defend that 10 pounds of gold to make it relevant. Rob Conway did that. I know Rob Conway had a falling out with the new ownership, and we probably will never see Rob Conway in an NWA ring again, but I don't think people should sleep on the accomplishments that Conway had while wrestling in Japan, and I definitely don't think that people should sleep on the accomplishments he had and what he provided for the NWA. But the third thing that I really enjoyed about the Tharpe era, and it's hard for me to even say, guys, is Jax Dane and Tim Storm. Jax Dane and Tim Storm, briefly, their feud unified the North American and National Championship. Now, for you guys that don't know, back then that was a big deal. Jax Dane is really the Grand Slam champion of the NWA because he held the tag titles, he held the national title, he held the North American title, and of course he was a world's heavyweight champion. Held the tag titles with Rob Conway, by the way. Defended those titles in Japan, by the way. And Tim Storm, well, you guys know everything you need to know about Tim Storm. There's a reason why he still works with the NWA. He's a great guy. Not only is he a great guy, but he's a tough competitor. And at 53 years of age, I mean, he's in better shape than most guys who are in their prime right now. So props to Tim Storm for carrying that legacy of the NWA to this new era. But again, Rob Conway, I'm getting off pace there, but ultimately this feud between Jack Stane and Tim Storm meant so much to the NWA, and it kept the ball rolling, it kept things interesting. And as soon as that feud was over, as soon as Jack Stane kind of exited the National Wrestling Alliance back then, that's when things started slowing down. That's when the ball stopped rolling. That's when you got guys who probably should never have held a major NWA title did. And yeah, come at me. I don't care. Greg Anthony should have never been a national champion. But I digress, because ultimately seeing this storyline revitalized in the NWA Power era makes my heart happy, and I hope we see more of that. I would love to see Satoshi Kojima come back to the NWA and challenge Nick Aldis for that 10 pounds of gold. I'd love to see guys from the past come back and challenge. I'd love to see Nick Aldis and Blue Demon Jr. wrestle in Mexico. I would love to see Nick Aldis challenge the Great Muta. Challenge? I used that term incorrectly. I'd love to see the Great Muta challenge Nick Aldis for that World's Heavyweight Champion. And I honestly don't care if it's in Japan or the United States. Just give me access. If it's in the U.S., I will probably fly to that show. If it's in Japan, I will order the pay-per-view. Hell, maybe I'll go. I don't know. But, the sky's the limit with the NWA. The brand itself has still so much potential. And yes, some of the air has been taken from their wings. Am I saying that right? Probably not. They've been a little deflated because of this coronavirus, and as many people should have. It's affected not just businesses, but people. This has been a terrible time, and it's painful as a fan of the National Wrestling Alliance to see so much positivity kind of, I don't want to say squandered, because it's not their fault, but it certainly is not eliminated, it's the wrong word. It slowed things down. So, yeah, I really think that they have to get the ball rolling, and I really think they can. I think they will. I think Billy Corgan is a lot smarter than people think he is, especially when it comes to pro wrestling. And don't get me started on Dave Lagana. I respect the hell out of Dave Lagana. If you guys don't appreciate the work that he's put in for the National Wrestling Alliance, I don't know what to tell you. And again, as this whole thing keeps on churning, we're building up to something. This is the part of the show where I wish you guys were here with me so I could start reading your comments. Now, you can still leave your comments. I'm going to read them, but I'm not responding live, obviously. And maybe if you guys leave comments here, I'll respond via Instagram, and we'll do a little show on Instagram. I don't know. As you guys may or may not know, I've been multi-streaming this show for the last few weeks, where for a while there we were doing a live stream on Twitch, we were doing a live stream on YouTube, we were doing a live stream on Instagram. We're going to focus mostly on not Facebook, nope. We're mostly focused on the YouTube channel, and maybe we'll put some content up on Instagram as well, because I know there is an audience there. And again, I appreciate you guys checking this out. Yeah, I miss you guys. So it looks like we might have a new challenger for the 10 pounds of gold. Sorry, Mr. Aldis. But on the episode 2 of Inside the NWA, Joe Galley joined Homicide and Eddie Kingston, known as Outlaw Inc. About 10 minutes into the episode, the discussion kind of turned to goals and plans of Outlaw Inc. And although they are a tag team, Hernandez and Kingston, the discussion changed hands, and it kind of went more towards Eddie Kingston's ambitions. Now, first, they want to deal with the Pope. And hopefully at Crockett Cup, that opportunity will arise, and we could put an end to that feud that they have going on right now. But, well, I'll just quote the man. Who is the best modern grappler today? It's the world champion, am I correct? Because having that title makes you the world's best modern-day grappler. Why wouldn't I go after Nick? Why not? That's the goal, to be the NWA World Champion. That's the goal. prior to the global pandemic, Eddie Kingston has spent the entire month of February wrestling in the UK and in Germany. But again, he's been plagued in the NWA by the Pope, who initially looked to represent Homicide and Kingston as a tag team before turning against them and bringing in guys like the Bouncers from Ring of Honor, of course, having the Dawson brothers work against them as well. To Eddie Kingston's credit, he does have a long-standing history with the National Wrestling Alliance, dating back to 2005, when he used to work with former associates, the NWA No Limits, as well as IWA Mid-South, who at the time carried a membership with the NWA. Kingston has never had the opportunity to challenge for the 10 pounds of gold. So a match between Nick Aldis and Eddie Kingston could really be something unique and different that the NWA hasn't provided yet. And although Kingston is one of the premier talkers in the NWA, I mean, the promos alone, seriously, could get you to this match. I can't guarantee that Kingston would even get that match. Because, I mean, arguably, Kingston is the best talker, and his skill set in the ring speaks for itself. However, he hasn't had a single victory in the NWA. Not one. Sure, he has moral victories watching Eli Drake and James Storm beat the Bouncers, but his hand has never been held in victory yet in the NWA. So it's kind of hard for me as someone who pontificates about pro wrestling to suggest that somebody like Eddie Kingston even deserves a shot at the 10 pounds of gold. And like I said, he's a world-class athlete. He's a world-class competitor. He's a tough dude. He's a mean dude. He'll stab you. I mean, he said it himself. But the accolades don't match up with the ambition. And although it would be fun to fantasy book a series of promos between Nick Aldis and Eddie Kingston, just right now, I don't think it makes sense. Kingston definitely has to have more victories to solidify his challenge, but how awesome would that be, honestly? Could Ethan Carter III be heading to the NWA? You know, since the WWE recently laid off about 30 employees, whether it be wrestlers or agents, producers, referees even, a lot of people thought, oh, the NWA needs to sign this guy or the NWA needs to sign that guy. And honestly, you've seen some free agents, either from the WWE or just guys who weren't signed, have now appeared in multiple different promotions. In fact, even though we're in this global pandemic, it hasn't really slowed down some of the other wrestling promotions in signing new names to work on their shows. AEW famously just acquired Brian Cage for their show. And Brian Cage had a great debut with Taz as his manager. We know Ricky Starks has announced himself as a free agent, distancing himself from the National Wrestling Alliance. But former NWA stars Tasha Steelz is now working in Impact. Impact signed former Impact talents like Crazy Steve and Sue Young. So we're seeing a lot of these rosters grow. Hell, Ring of Honor recently re-signed Flip Gordon. We talked about this on the last podcast. But we also have seen the likes of MLW re-signing Hammerstone. So with all this moving around, these moving pieces, the NWA has been slow to announce any kind of signing. In fact, a lot of the people thought the rumors on episode 2 of Carnyland was in fact directed at the rumors that Ethan Carter III would be signing. And why not? The NWA has certainly done its part to feed that fuel to this conspiracy that maybe EC3 could be headed to the NWA. Now, let's face the facts. It would be somewhat of a reunion for EC3 and for the leadership, for the creative here in NWA, because Billy Corgan and Dave Lagana both were working at Impact at the time that Ethan Carter III was kind of building his brand in Impact. But also, I mean, Billy Corgan specifically called out EC3 by name. I'll read you the quote right here. It says, "One person I would point out that I have a tremendous respect for and is currently a free agent is EC3. Super talented guy. It is mind-blowing to me why he's not at the top level of the business and why he hasn't been given a better opportunity from where he just left." And then I'm going to paraphrase this. He's a total salt of the earth guy. Nobody works harder a level talent, a main event player, and so hopefully he'll land in the right situation. And if he lands with us, I'd love it too. Again, EC3 is a former 4-time 24/7 WWE champion. He's also a former Impact Grand Champion and held the TNA World Title twice. And well, I mean, I'm not going to try to draw comparisons, but there are a couple of other talents on the roster who are former TNA World Heavyweight Champions that are doing quite well in the National Wrestling Alliance. I'd also like to think that maybe a guy like EC3 would really benefit from working in the NWA. You know, he was the top guy in Impact for a while, but he's never taking that next step. And I kind of blame WWE for this not happening. I really feel like if the World Wrestling Entertainment had an opportunity to showcase somebody who, let's face it, he could talk, guys. He cuts a good promo. He's got a body like Adonis, and he works pretty well in the ring too. There's not a whole lot holding this guy back. And when you get the the slap of the seal of approval from Billy Corgan saying that he's a salt of the earth kind of guy who nobody works harder than, why isn't he making his name somewhere? AEW can't sign everybody. Impact can't sign everybody. Would he even go back to Impact? It remains to be seen. Money makes us all do crazy things, and I don't know how comfortable he's living, but EC3 in the NWA just spells $, $. And I think, again, when we talk about potential challengers to Nick Aldis and the 10 pounds of gold, or whomever the world champion is at the end of Crockett Cup 2020, if we have a Crockett Cup 2020, would be somebody who can cut a promo, somebody who has a good look, somebody who can wrestle. And EC3 has all those checked off on his boxes. So, I don't know, guys. What do you think? Leave a comment below if you think that EC3 is going to end up in the NWA. What else? Well, I don't know how many of you guys are nerds like me that look up statistics of how many people are watching videos of the NWA website. Just me? Okay, cool. Back in a couple weeks ago, the NWA announced that they had surpassed 200,000 subscribers on their YouTube channel. In fact, that number today is just over 205,000 subscribers, which is huge. I mean, that's a huge victory for the NWA. The video views for the brand have been somewhere around 25% up. And they've added 4,000 subscribers just in the last 30 days. In the past 30 days, the NWA aired the finale of, for NWA Power, Superpower, and it has premiered its new offerings, including Carnyland. Now, the NWA created their channel nearly 3 years ago with the launch of 10 Pounds of Gold. The success of 10 Pounds of Gold was crucial to launching the NWA brand. It introduced Tim Storm to a larger audience, and the show was basically built as a way to showcase the world's heavyweight champion, be it Tim Storm or later Nick Aldis, and kind of build up to these higher profile matches. Since the NWA has created the 7 new series for YouTube, since then, messed up my own notes. Since then, the NWA has created 7 new series since the 10 Pounds of Gold. And I mean, technically, I think it even says 8, because there was that deal they were going to do with Willie Mack that they did one episode, never came to fruition because he signed with Impact. But let's face it, this is paramount. The quality of content being created is pretty good. I'm not going to say this replaces wrestling by any stretch of the means, but what it does is it keeps these characters in our hearts and minds. It allows us to see these talents still participating. They didn't disappear, and if you're watching the show, they are kind of advancing some storyline in some angles. Now, will this create a new show, or I don't know. Will these storylines in Carnyland translate to storylines in the NWA Power when it returns? Who's to say? But the other point of this, why that's important, is because since the global pandemic, COVID-19 has pretty much put an end to all pro wrestling in the United States that isn't WWE, AEW, or Impact. The pocketbooks of the NWA have to be hurting. guys, they count on those revenues from ticket sales and pay-per-view numbers to pay guys salaries, to keep people, to keep the doors open, if you will, to keep the lights on. And some of that money does come from YouTube. Now, are they making millions of dollars on YouTube? Probably not. But there was revenue being generated by that content that, honestly, viewership is down. So by creating these new shows, they're really kind of focusing on different aspects of the NWA. The inside the NWA usually, or I believe it's going to be just with Joe Gallo. He's going to interview people within the NWA, and basically they're going to talk about the National Wrestling Alliance. What's causing all this is Nick Aldis's basically his podcast. It's him talking to his friends about wrestling, and it's very entertaining. If you haven't watched either one of those shows, I highly recommend them. I would also recommend the Eli Drake Show. He just had Flying Brian Pillman Jr. on his show recently, and that was pretty cool to hear that perspective. And, you know, Brian Pillman is a MLW signed wrestler. So it's not even just limited to what's happening in the NWA universe. It's life. It's what's going on. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the NWA Girl Power, which, I mean, gosh, what a heavy time to be talking about this sort of stuff in pro wrestling. I tried to do it the last couple of weeks, and it's been hard. But with Black Lives Matter and cyberbullying kind of dominating the headlines in the last few weeks, the girls kind of tackle these issues. The NWA Power Girls, Girl Powers, are tackling these issues and talking about, you know, mental health, and talking about Black Lives Matter, and I mean, at the very least, you should commend them for attempting to talk about such a dark subject matter, such a heavy subject matter. But I think what's the benefit to that, though, is they're having that conversation now, and you could be a part of that. You could be a part of that conversation. And you could see a different side of the story. You could see the different perspective. So, I mean, not only is it wrestling content, but it's wrestling-themed content, but it's also perspective content. It gives you an opportunity to see what else is happening. But, I mean, you have to acknowledge that Billy Corgan early on said this was going to be a business. He wasn't just going to throw money at the business. They had to carry its own weight. He wasn't going to just throw money after it like a lot of other people expected him to do because of his social economic standing, but good on him that he hasn't done that. So for them to be inventive and put out quality content that maybe isn't pro wrestling but is pro wrestling themed, and kind of pushes the narrative that the NWA is still here and they can't wait to get back to producing pro wrestling live events. But the thing about this is none of this stuff has to stop. None of it. These shows, look, it's 7 or 5 hours of programming every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. 5 hours of entertainment that really costs you nothing if you're watching it on YouTube. It's helping to keep the lights on. It's keeping the advertising dollars coming in, no matter how big or small. It's also keeping the channel, which analytically, the more content you produce, the more eyeballs are watching it, the better it is, the better advertisements you get, the better ad placements you get. It's a win-win to keep producing content. For the NWA to stall or stop at this point would be painful for them, even more so than it's been. It's a way to push new merchandise, which they do. And then also they're pushing signing up for Patreon. Now the entry level, I believe, is $10. Maybe it's $5. Someone can source me on that. I don't have it here in front of me, but I know like the Supreme membership is $50 a month, and with that comes stuff like behind the scenes conference calls that you get to talk with some of the talents that are involved with producing Carnyland for right now, maybe NWA Power when that returns to programming. But again, this company is doing what it has to do to stay alive, and I respect that. I respect the hunger, the tenacity. If you're a fan of MLW, you can go back and watch MLW videos, but there isn't new content coming out. And these personalized, more human aspect of Nick Aldis, or the more human aspect of Tim Storm, who was in the latest episode of the Inside the NWA, you're getting to see these people in a different light. Now, of course, Nick Aldis and Tim Storm have been kind of shoved down our throats, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but I mean that they receive all the attention. They've been part of the a main storyline since the NWA's inception. But we get James Storm on Nick Aldis' podcast, or Eli Drake. I think he's breaking out and doing something. This podcast I really think is going to be something special, I should say. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the NWA is trying to make more content for you guys, and I want to know, are you guys watching it? And if so, what are you watching? What are you prioritizing? Carnyland is okay to me. I don't love it. I don't hate it. It's something to watch. I really do like. I love what's causing all this. I think this is exactly what the NWA should have been doing all along. I kind of wish they would have taken an opportunity to put maybe a match or two in every episode. You've got Nick Aldis. He can sit there and talk about his matches that he had with all kinds of talent. But, these things will all kind of ebb and flow, and they'll change how they do things. And the influence is actually spilling over into David Marquez's wrestling promotion, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, or the United Wrestling Network. Now they're starting to produce micro content as well as long podcasts. I mean, just recently they had Rey Rosas. They did a little micro content called The Push that was talking about Rey Rosas and talking about his opportunity and how he almost retired from the sport to kind of get where he is right now. He's the Arizona State champion for the United Wrestling Network, and he's also holds the PP3 Cup. And if you guys don't know about the PP3 Cup, we talk about that another time, but basically that is the equivalent of the Money in the Bank for Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, guaranteeing Rey Rosas a title shot at a future champion, basically whenever he wants to cash that in. So that kind of seeing Championship Wrestling from Hollywood use the same kind of style of format to keep producing content out on their own. We're getting more and more free content, guys. And if you can't enjoy free content, I don't know what to tell you. And speaking of Rey Rosas, personally, I love Rey Rosas. I've been able to watch his career from maturation, from beginning till now. He was the last EWF Cruiserweight champion. Now, EWF out here in Southern California is the longest standing wrestling promotion. It's been independent for almost, 21 years now. Rey Rosas was the last person to hold their Cruiserweight title, and he's been on to hold tag team titles with a former tag team partner, AEW's librarian, Pretty Peter Avalon. Now, they held those tag titles in Hollywood. Back then, they called them the Hollywood Heritage Tag Titles. They feuded with the Rock Ness Monsters, took the titles to Mexico, defended them in the Crash Wrestling promotion. Peter and Rey also held the ILW tag team titles. And for a while there, it felt like Peter and Rey were just tag team royalty here in Southern California. And they were making their marks in every single wrestling promotion you could think of. When Rey took a break from Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, obviously, Peter Avalon changed the direction of his character. So when Rey Rosas came back, it wasn't the reunion we all would have hoped for. But the duo still found a way to create this energy in Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. And Rey Rosas has gotten better and better and better week after week after week. And although his character now has changed, where who cares who Rey Rosas is, there's a lot of people that still do care about Rey Rosas. And Rey Rosas had this to say about the NWA.
I guess it's just the expectations of that those fans have and that I have. Maybe what I've already gotten is not good enough for me. I want more. Championships are good. Championships are great. That equals more. I guess it equals more TV time and more money. But it all comes down to just having more respect from everybody that watches, everybody that competes. We have a lot of great big stars and names that come through the United Wrestling Network, and when they do, Rey Rosas gets pushed down the ladder just a little bit. I want to be on the same level as these people. I want to be seen as like Rey Rosas and Nick Aldis, Rey Rosas and James Storm. Like these are guys that are just in the same league. But when it's Nick Aldis and it's James Storm, and then, there's Ray Rosas right here. That's what I mean when I'm not being presented in the way that I deserve to be.
Essentially, after challenging Willie Mack, he's seen Nick Aldis come into his territory, Hollywood. He has seen James Storm come into his territory and Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. So why wouldn't Ray Rosas want to put his name on the same level as Nick Aldis, as James Storm? Now, you're going to have to pay your dues to do that, sir. And then the best way to do that is to somehow get to Atlanta, Georgia, right? Somehow to bring Ray Rosas to the NWA. But, I mean, that doesn't happen by accident either. You got to have the right connections. And I kind of feel like this would be a good fit. And like I said, I know I'm biased, but with Ricky Starks leaving the NWA, you lost somebody who is very charismatic, not the biggest guy on the roster, who can wrestle very well, and is a good talker. That sounds like Ray Rosas. To me, it does. And Ray Rosas could certainly bring a different element to the show. Now, again, he's not the biggest guy on the roster, so, of course, I don't expect him to make a huge impact immediately. But his abilities, I think, would eventually, over time, get him over to the same way it did in Hollywood, same way it did in Arizona. So, why not Ray Rosas? Well, we're kind of running out of time here, guys. And like I said, normally we do a live stream, and this would be the time where I take your questions and we talk a little NWA ourselves. And you can ask me what you think about this, and I can ask you what you think about this. But since we're not going live today, I kind of miss out on that feature. But I will say this, we will return Tuesday. We'll return Tuesday at 5:05 Eastern, 2:05 Pacific. I hope you guys will join us, and we will talk NWA. As you can see, the things are starting to look a little bit different around here, and hopefully things are going to continue to look different, because I'm trying to make this show look A+ for you guys, and I hope you appreciate that. And I don't even care if you appreciate it, I hope you like it. I want you guys to enjoy this show. So if you have any feedback, please leave it in the comments below. I do read all the feedback. I do try to comment that on the feedback you guys leave us. And of course, please visit us on all social medias at the Alliance Blog. That's Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, Tumblr, TikTok. Wherever you're at, that's where we want to be. So, for the Alliance-Wrestling.com website, your number one source for news and information for the NWA, I am J Cal, and I encourage you to go now and head over to Carnyland, and let's watch some Carnyland get carny? I don't know, guys, but I'll see you at the matches.